The surprise death of artist superstar Andy Warhol in 1987 shocked friends and family and threw the art world into confusion. His house, jam-packed with artworks, antiques, and untold mountains of junk, was immediately declared off-limits. His studio, also overflowing with unfinished paintings, artworks, antiques, and yet more junk, was similarly barricaded against scavengers, friends, and even his family. It was still only 7 a.m. on the 22nd of February, 1987. The value of his estate was later estimated at $600 million. In 1994, the Andy Warhol Museum opened in his hometown of Pittsburgh. Much of Warhol's massive collection of the precious and the everyday is now housed here. A legacy of hundreds of thousands of things, including 600 time capsules and 4,000 audio tapes. Years after his death, the archaeological dig prompted by all this evidence of a life left behind is still uncovering clues about the elusive Andy Warhol, the Citizen Kane of the art world. Truman Capote once famously characterized Warhol as the Sphinx without a secret. But to believe that is to believe all of this adds up to nothing.
The real Warhol, so to speak, I think was Andrew Warhol, who was born and died and was of a certain person of ethnicity, had religious beliefs, etc., etc., etc. That was reality. The created Andy Warhol, I think, is someone, in a sense, for me, who's in the artwork.
But even there, it's hard to pin down a single Andy Warhol, because he made so many different kinds of work. He served as soup cans, Coke bottles, and Marilyn Monroe as fine art, and immortalized everyday images of death and disaster in America before moving swiftly on to avant-garde filmmaking. He managed the rock group The Velvet Underground and also managed to get himself shot by one of his entourage. Even that didn't stop him. He then went through several other transformations into a publisher, a society portrait painter, an author, a TV chat show host, and eventually into an international art star. But who was Andy Warhol? On his journey from Andrew Warholer, he would not only change his name, but also customize his personality to create a mechanical, factory-produced brand name that would embody the celebrity and consumer culture of the times. Andrew Warholer was born in Pittsburgh in 1928 to Slovakian immigrant parents, Julia and Andre. He was the youngest of 3 sons, his mother's favorite.
You get these people, the hybrids, like I'm a hybrid, as Andy was. People who come from working class background, who were second generation, in this case first generation immigrants in this country, who came from steelworkers' families. There wasn't a book in the house. Our economic background did not suggest that we would be capable of any kind of larger enterprise in our life. Our fathers were both steelworkers, so we had that lot in common, and we were both Slovak, so we were both from the same ethnic background.
Before Andy was born, his father had followed the well-trodden trail from Slovakia to Pittsburgh to find employment as a construction worker. It would be 5 years before Andre would send for his wife Julia to join him. This is all that remains of the poor immigrant homes where Warhol was born. Poles, Lithuanians, Slovakians and Italians made up the young Warholers' insular community.
He was really shy, but I guess over the years when he started having, right before he passed away, he was he could really ask you all kind of questions, and he overcame his shyness. I don't know how, but I think that stems from our heritage. Our people are basically, quiet and just they let the other people do the talking, and they just I guess some of that it just rubs off on you.
Andy's oldest brother, Paul, still lives on a farm just outside Pittsburgh. He often had the job of looking after the sensitive, withdrawn, and delicate Andy.
I took him into school the first day and waited for him, and Andy didn't come out here. I says, I don't know what happened to Andy, and here he had somebody had smacked him, some little girl had smacked him, and he come running home from school. After he was smacked by this girl, he was afraid of school. Andy was crying. Oh, he was kicking. He was screaming. He didn't want to go back to school. And he developed this nervous disorder, being very fidgety, just moving his hands and.
Andy had developed the neurological disease Vitus dance, and as a result, spent the best part of his 8th year in bed. His mother gave him colouring books to fill in. It was a formative year.
My father was away a lot on business trips to the coal mines, so I never saw him very much. My mother would read to me in her thick Czechoslovakian accent as best she could, and I would always say thanks, Mom, after she finished with Dick Tracy, even if I hadn't understood a word. She'd give me a Hershey bar every time I finished a page in my coloring book.
I used to have to send away and get him pictures of the movie stars. One special occasion, I wrote to Shirley Temple, and she sent them an 8x10 photograph of her, and it had to Andrew Warhol from Shirley Temple, and I think it's done at the museum now.
So this is a scrapbook that Warhol kept beginning in about 1940, when he was about 12 years old. Actually, a lot of the photographs are dated. And on this first page, there's this particular photo, which is really fabulous. It's an autographed Mae West photo, which is signed to Andrew Warhol, Eleanor Powell, and Ann Miller. Greetings from your dancing friend. This is the Shirley Temple page. And you can see, if you get the light right, I don't know, tell me, can you see it? Yeah. He's practicing her signature.
When Andy was only 13 years old, his father died of peritonitis, brought on by industrial water poisoning. The same year, he drew this unhappy self-portrait. His father left behind a small trust fund, which was now put towards an art education for the talented youngest Warholer. Even at college, Andy tended to stand out in the crowd. In 1949, the ambitious Andrew Warhol decided to move to New York to pursue a career as a commercial artist. After he settled in Manhattan, Warhol sent for his mother. She was to live with him there for most of her remaining life. She barely spoke a word of English, and to outsiders, their mutually dependent relationship seemed strange.
He'd lived with his mother for years in that house on Lexington Avenue. People would say it's a little like Psycho,
If you didn't know, you'd think she was the cleaning lady. I mean, she really never said much, and she was shuffling in and out of rooms with a broom or something.
One morning I asked her, I said, did you sleep well, Ms. Warhol? And I could understand her perfectly. And she says, no. I said, I'm sorry. She says, I sat up and watched Andy sleep all night. She didn't sleep herself. And I thought, how strange.
She apparently wanted to meet me because she had heard me. I guess she heard us kissing in the hall. Then I sort of became really paranoid. When I was drunk, leaving the house, I would give a hug or a kiss, and I said, "Oh my God, she hears us. That's why she wants." So he took me down, and he said, "Mom, this is John." And I was Mrs. Warhol. And then they started talking in Czech.
Clients in New York were immediately attracted by the unusual quality of Andy's drawing style and intrigued by the odd-looking man hiding behind it. Joan Fenton became art editor of 17 magazine the same year Warhol moved from Pittsburgh to New York and gave him one of his first jobs. It was something that perhaps had particular appeal for an artist who thought of himself as an ugly duckling.
He left his portfolio, and when I saw it, I thought, I've got just the right job for him. And it was a story we were doing on allergies. And so, because his line was very scratchy and a little bit upsetting, I gave him a double-page spread of all the things that make you itch and scratch and sneeze, and he understood.
He had a skin problem. It was very obvious. He was so pale, and very often he'd get these blotches from the sun. And he couldn't go out in the sun, but that sort of also added something to his personality. But it was unfortunate. He was painfully shy because of that.
He had white hair and white skin, very pale. But evidently the thing that bothered him was his nose. The fact that he should go and have cosmetic surgery and be worried about his nose when his appearance was really not ordinary.
At one time, the way my nose looked really bothered me. It's always red. And I decided that I wanted to have it sanded. Even the people in my family called me Andy the Red-Nosed Warhola. I went to see the doctor, and I think he thought he'd humor me, so he sanded it. And when I walked out of St. Luke's Hospital, I was the same underneath, but I had a bandage on.
Andy's first real studio in New York was in a strange location. The exotic cafe, Serendipity, opened in 1954 by 3 gay men. Only minutes from Bloomingdale's, it quickly became the haunt of Hollywood stars such as Cary Grant and Grace Kelly, who would drop in for the legendary desserts. These are Andy's drawings of one of the owners, Stephen Bruce, an early infatuation.
It was very obvious from the beginning that he adored men, and he always surrounded himself with the most attractive people in New York. He had a very bulbous nose when I first met him, and he probably did have some plastic surgery. And I think the feeling came, he was surrounded by beautiful people, a little bit of that would rub off on himself. And I think he used his drawings to attract people. That was the tone that he set for the rest of his life, being surrounded by people, having help with his artwork.
It was Andy's striking, elegant illustrations for I. Miller shoes that sealed his reputation as a hot new commercial artist. The contract also had personal appeal for Andy. He clearly had a thing about shoes.
Well, this is one box of them anyway. Neatly wrapped. We have dozens and dozens of pairs of these really great Halston disco high heels. We could spend all day looking at Halston shoes, but we won't.
Andy's shoe fetish didn't stop at high heels. He loved his own footwear as well.
And these we've organized a lot better. He loved these shoes. Even by the color of that paint, that green color that's right here, that looks like the background color of the mint Marilyn Monroe. He didn't really throw away too many things. I doubt that he kept literally everything, but it really does seem like it. These shoes would have been 25 years old at the time that he died.
This is the home of Teddy and Arthur Edelman, makers of exotic leather products. Impressed by Warhol's drawings for I. Miller shoes, they tracked him down to help promote their own highly distinctive product.
We just loved him.
Well, he certainly looked very strange when he came to our office because the people who worked for us were old-type leather people. And in walked Andy with his Jackson Pollock shoes and his black suit and this wild hair and the white face, and people thought, God knows who this was.
That was one of the first things he ever did for us. A snake shoe we wanted to promote, snakeskin for shoes, for ladies' shoes. He took a snake and he drew a shoe out of it.
He had a very literal way of approaching things. If you say you want a snake shoe, he made a snake shoe. I mean, he took it always to its base, which made it, I think, incredibly exciting.
At one point, the reptiles were almost becoming endangered species, and we were out of animals. And we did a contract with a vinyl company to try and create the look of what we did. And we had the idea of calling them genuine fakes. And we called Andy in. Andy, we need genuine fakes. So he did an elephant with zebra stripes. He did a double-bodied kangaroo. He did everything, and everything it's a genuine fake.
But Andy's ambitions were moving beyond commercial art. He wanted to be a real artist. By 1960, he was painting existing magazine ads on canvas in a style that combined the graphic, linear approach of commercial design and the drippy, gestural marks of fine art painting at the time. In the States, this was in the hands of the internationally renowned abstract expressionist movement and its high-profile heroes Jackson Pollock and Willem de Kooning. When these tortured heavyweight painters weren't making grand, splashy, abstract work, they were debating the meaning of art and occasionally brawling over women in the Cedar Tavern in New York. They despised popular culture and all that Warhol and his contemporaries stood for. They had defined painting as a straight guy's profession. How could a gay commercial illustrator possibly regard himself as a serious artist?
The guys who were making abstract expressionism had absolute contempt for commercial life, for commercial art, for what you see in the supermarkets. I mean, they really loathed it.
When he started doing the Campbell Soup paintings, of course, it's a kind of commercial art, but this was a new era, the pop art era, which took everybody by surprise.
British artist Richard Hamilton had defined pop art as glamorous, expendable, mass-produced and popular. He had pioneered the concept along with artists like Peter Blake, who anticipated both the subject matter and approach of the American pop movement.
It changed the direction of art. You should read it in the same way that you read pop music. So those early things were directed at the same people that would like an Elvis Presley song, might like a painting of Elvis Presley. It was an enormous rejection of accepted values in art and finding new ways. For instance, something as simple as using the primary colours in art. It simply wasn't, you didn't.
In 1961, Andy was painting comic book imagery, still attempting to find a unique place for himself as an artist. It wasn't only the abstract expressionist mafia that was resisting pop art's aesthetic. His new paintings of Campbell's soup cans were even scandalizing his young artist friends.
Mademoiselle magazine in the early 60s said, there's something happening, and that thing that happened turned out to be the pop artist. And so they gave me a list of people to photograph, and Andy's name was on it. And I was shocked. What the hell is he doing on this list? And when I went over to his studio, suddenly there he was playing rock and roll music. He was wearing black, he was wearing jeans, and he had a room full of these Campbell soup cans, Now what the hell is this? Only the flavor was changed to protect the innocent,
Warhol's art is thought-provoking. Though one of the thoughts you can provoke is bullshit. This is just bullshit. This is nothing but a soup can. But if you hold back on that and say, wait a second, why would anyone put a soup can on a work of art to have us look at it? Pretty soon you do start moving forward with real thoughts.
That meant a lot to him politically, that everybody could have it if they just had a few cents. It was as good as you could get, and everybody could get it. He was a very political person. He was very much a Democrat in that way. I think he says, all Coca-Colas are alike and all Coca-Colas are good. If you're the Queen of England, you couldn't have a better Coca-Cola than the bum on the corner.
Andy finally got his first one-man painting show on the West Coast. 32 soup cans were opened at the Ferris Gallery in Los Angeles in the summer of 1962.
In the 60s, we were all looking for the next new thing. I had been waiting for a long time for what I called the return to reality out of abstract expressionism. We were all third-generation abstract expressionists, and everybody was screaming, the critics, everybody was talking about the return to reality. It was at the Ferris Gallery. I was shown a soup can and a cartoon by Lichtenstein. And I just flipped. They said, what do you think of this? And I flipped. I said, well, this is the return to reality.
The Ferris Gallery was advertising his paintings for $100 a painting, you know. Down the street, another gallery intimidated him by putting a Camel soup can in the window. And why pay $100 for a painting when you can buy the Camel soup can for 15 cents?
Andy took a beating at the hands of the LA critics, who dismissed the show as a shallow con, not realizing just how personal it was.
Mother always served Camel soup. She always had a good supply. Andy was fond of chicken noodle, you know, chicken rice.
Even when they were living together in New York, Andy's mother continued to serve Campbell's soup to her successful son.
Warhol said about Campbell's soup, you know, well, I ate it for lunch every day of my life. And the idea is seeing it as the embodiment of nourishment, of warmth, of comfort. For Warhol, it really meant a lot. And I think only somebody who had a very vivid sense of the precariousness of life might have felt that way. I mean, he was pretty poor after all. They didn't necessarily know where the next meal was coming from.
I think he was someone who used everything, every experience, every extra bit of paper. I think that sense of efficiency, and I think working, you know, in a working class family, you know, you didn't have the luxury of tossing out half the pie that was uneaten. You didn't.
Certainly Andy was never to abandon his favorite brand of soup. Benjamin Liu was his last painting assistant in the 1980s, and one of the very few people ever to be invited inside his home on East 66th Street.
Andy said, I'll make some lunch for you guys. I thought, that's amazing. And you know what he made?
No. Well, go on.
Now, I thought he was playing a joke on us. He opened a can of Campbell tomato soup and heated up and gave us some bread. Now, I said, you know what? You don't have to play the pop artist. This is the off hours. It's like, you know. But then he did. I guess he really eat that stuff. But considering he's healthy.
Yes, he did.
Is that funny? I was like, you gotta be kidding.